It's one of those mornings when the motives of your heart are really tested. You know, it's very easy for you to get somewhere in between and say, let me go back and sleep or do something else. But this is a time like this morning, maybe the motives of your heart are truly, truly tested. Why are you pursuing everywhere or trying to move and meander throughout the city to get yourself to this place? There must be a motivation behind that. And so this morning, as we continue looking into the series that I've been speaking on keeping the fire burning, I want us to focus a bit again on just what is motivating us. What is motivating us to keep doing what we are doing? How are we going to keep these fires burning? And even as we talk about keeping that fire burning, we are looking at just keeping that which we began here at Abundant Life Community Church, keeping that project, Save ALCC, going. What it is, what do we need to do to keep that fire burning? And even in our own personal lives, maybe there are those things that you began doing, the things that you are excited to begin doing, but somehow along the way, the fire has been dying. Along the way, you are getting demotivated. Along the way, you are tiring. Along the way, you are feeling like giving up. Probably it's something that you are struggling with, something that you are believing in the Lord for. And as you have been moving along, a time comes when you feel discouraged, when you feel, for one reason or another, you feel discouraged. You feel that there are obstacles ahead of you, and you almost feel like you want to give up. And so this morning, as we look into, again, as we turn our hearts in the Word of God and continue even contemplating and meditating and thinking through, how do we keep this fire burning? I want us to again go back and ask ourselves, how can we stay motivated? How can we stay motivated? You see, there are many ways that we can get motivation. There's motivation that we say is intrinsic. That is motivation that comes from within us. But there's also motivation that is extrinsic, that is outside of us. And so if those of you who are fans of motivational speakers, those are motivations that come from outside. It's called extrinsic motivation from somebody else. This past Friday, I was watching the Kenya soccer team play Zimbabwe, and for some reason they can't play their matches in Kenya, so they were playing this match in Kampala. And as you'll imagine with me, there are very few Kenyans in Kampala, not as many as will have attended the match here. And so I could tell, and I was just trying to imagine what was going on in the minds of those players. They needed another motivation to keep going because the fans were not there. And so for a football player playing in an empty stadium, there is no noise, there is no much motivation that is coming from outside to keep you going. So you need to dig deep into your own internal motivations. In fact, they say that the intrinsic motivation is greater than that comes from outside. And motivation can be defined as channeling our emotions to set and achieve meaningful goals, even in the face of challenges. Motivation can be defined as channeling emotions to set and achieve meaningful goals, even in the face of challenges. And I think the key word there is meaningful goals. Motivations is channeling our emotions to set and achieve meaningful goals, even in the face of challenges. And for us to be able to do that, the keywords here are meaningful goals. That is goals that speak to who we are. Goals that resonate with us. Goals that address or are really relevant or resonate, as I'm saying, with us. Goals that answer the big why question. Why are we doing what we are doing? And so if that goal that you have is so meaningful to you, if the goal that you're pursuing is something that is coming from deep within yourself, there's a big reason as to why this goal must be achieved, then the motivation will be there. In spite of whatever challenges you're facing, you will find yourself pushing through. But also motivation also means maintaining a positive attitude and persevering through setbacks. Pressing on in spite of setbacks, but with a great attitude. Not complaining, not grumbling, but with a good attitude. Moving forward, knowing your why and being motivated, seeing the meaningful goal that you're pursuing, then having a positive positive attitude in the midst of all the things that we are faced with to achieve those goals. No goal is achieved without any obstacles, without any challenges. Everything that you'll endeavor to do, there'll always be a challenge. You show me a goal in which there are no obstacles or challenges, and I will tell you that's not a great goal. Any great goal must have a challenge. There will be obstacles. There will be deep valleys. There will be serious things that we need to overcome in order to achieve that goal. And for us to do that, that goal then must definitely be very meaningful to us. As I said last week, if we just find ourselves giving up, most likely that goal was not that meaningful. It wasn't that strong. It wasn't that compelling to us. It was maybe just something we were trying, and it wasn't as important to us as we thought it was. But when we find ourselves going over and over and keep pressing on and keep pushing on, then most likely that goal is meaningful to us. And so this morning, I want us to look at some people in the Bible who also started off in such zeal and enthusiasm as I've been sharing. They began with such fire. They saw God's mighty deliverance. And somehow along the way, they began to lose their motivation and could not keep this fire burning. And this is the children of Israel. And if you read in the book of Exodus, they are crying out to the Lord. And the Bible begins in the book of Exodus. I've been studying the first five books of the Bible. It's called the Pentateuch. Those are the first 5 books of the Bible written by Moses. That's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And in the book of, you see this, the beginning of all this is the book of Exodus, when these people are oppressed, and God says, I've heard the cry of my people. I've seen their affliction. And so God comes and in a mighty way delivers them out of the reign of Pharaoh. A place where they've been for 400 years in bondage. Suddenly, God comes through and they are delivered. And that deliverance is not a small deliverance. It's not a small time deliverance. It is a mighty deliverance. And so they are delivered out of that space and into their journey into the promised land. So beginning with the Red Sea, they see the Red Sea parted. They see the waters parted for them. And they begin their journey towards their goal, which is a meaningful goal. The land that was promised to their ancestors, their inheritance. And so they begin the move towards their goal. And as they are pressing on, they meet different obstacles. And the first of them is the Red Sea itself. As they come and the Egyptians are behind them, and in front of them is the Red Sea. A huge sea that they have to cross and go over to the other side on their way to their promised land. And as I said earlier, every goal that we want to achieve, there'll always be an obstacle before us. So for them, the first one is the Red Sea, and then they go and encounter a serious wilderness, walking through the desert. Not an easy thing to do. Walking through the desert with no water and sometimes with no food before God begins to provide them with manna. And on top of that, there are many enemies, there are many inhabitants of the land that they need to conquer in order for them to possess that land. And so as they go and as they are going, they don't maintain a positive attitude. They begin, as they encounter these different obstacles along the way, they suddenly forget why they're pursuing what they're pursuing. And it's very, very interesting that they begin to remember. They remember the wrong things. They remember the leeks and the onions that they enjoyed in Egypt and forget why they were delivered out of Egypt. It's interesting that so often, and I've seen this many times, with married people, they sometimes behave as if that, we maybe should have remained on the other side. We should have remained single, forgetting about how they suffered when they were single and were praying and believing God for a spouse. And now all of a sudden on this other side, they are thinking like the children of Israel. They're looking back and forgetting about how God has blessed them by delivering them from that place. Now, I'm not saying there is bondage being single, but God has delivered them from that space. So they are remembering the leeks and the onions instead of remembering how God has delivered them. And today I want to focus our minds on being reminded. Shekana began by asking us by telling us that she was reminded of a passage in the scripture. And when to remember, but I want us to remember the right things. Because people are remembering the wrong things and forgot the right things. So it's possible for us to remember the wrong things instead of remembering the right things, and then forget the right thing instead of forgetting the wrong things. There are things we need to forget. And for them, they needed to forget those onions and garlics and remember how God had delivered them out of Egypt. And so as they begin to complain, they begin to grumble and complain about just the things that they're going through. And so as you read through those first 5 books, go through Exodus and Numbers, you see how they encounter several challenges in Numbers. In fact, they even, they send spies to spy the land, and some of them come back and say, the people that live in that land are like giants. They are always obstacles. They see these people as giants, and they see themselves as grasshoppers before them. And they spread fear among the rest of them, and the people are almost giving up when they are just on the brink of their miracle. You see, friends, I've realized that so often we may give up when we're just on the brink of that miracle. When we're just about to bore, that's the time that we give up. If only we push a little bit more, if only we press in a bit more, we will have achieved. And so as this time in the book of Deuteronomy, that's going to be our text this morning, they are just on the verge of possessing the land. And Moses is their leader. And many times Moses has pleaded with God on their behalf. Moses has stood and interceded for them. In fact, it's because of them that Moses himself will not see the promised land. And Moses is a good leader. You're encouraging people and motivating them to get there. You know yourself you won't get there. But he's still encouraging them and wants to motivate them not to give up in this 11th hour, that they may be able to enter in and to possess the land. And so in our text this morning, I want us to focus on Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verses 17 to 21. Deuteronomy 7 verses 17 to 21. Moses is now reminding them. He's coming back in the book of Deuteronomy. A very, very interesting book. If some of you have not read, I know many of us just love chapter 28, where there are blessings. And how the many blessings. But let's read the whole book. It's a very, very interesting book. In fact, the book of Deuteronomy records Moses' words to Israel as the Lord commanded Moses. The title Deuteronomy comes from the phrase Deuteronomy. From a phrase in Deuteronomy 17 verse 18, where the king is to write a copy of the law. And this phrase in Greek is Deuteronomion, which means a second law. It's like a second law, but some people thought that it was another law. No, it's not another law. It's just an exposition of the 10 commandments. In fact, if you read the book of Deuteronomy, God is beginning to expound why you should not have other gods but Him. God is beginning to expound on why it's important to have Sabbath and all the other 10 laws. So it's an exposition of the law that was given in Mount Sinai. But another interesting thing about this book of Deuteronomy is that it's a book that is there to remind these children of Israel about the things that God has done. The structure of the book of Deuteronomy is similar to the structure of many of the Hittite treaties of the time. These people are not living in isolation. They were living among a people. And those people, when there were wars and other things, the kings will sign treaties between them and the different people that they were fighting. When there was a peace treaty, they had to sign that treaty, which stipulated certain things that were to be looked into in that treaty. And so the structure of Deuteronomy is like a treaty. And why will this book of Deuteronomy be written as a treaty? Maybe so that the people will recognize that it had the form of one, and that perhaps God was reminding the Israelites of His covenant with them, of His treaty with them. He's reminding them of why He is bringing them out of the place and to the place that He has promised them, beginning with their forefathers, Abraham. In fact, in Swahili, the book of Deuteronomy is called Kumbukumbu la Torati, from where we get the word kumbuka. So it's a remembering, it's a book of remembrance. And so in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 17 to 21, which is our text this morning, it says, if you say in your heart, these nations are greater than I, how can I dispossess them? You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. The great trials your eyes saw, the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. So will the Lord your God do to all the peoples of whom you are afraid. Moreover, the Lord your God will send hornets among them until those who are left and hide themselves from you are destroyed. And then verse 21 says, you shall not be in dread of them, for the Lord your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. Friends, the Lord our God is in our midst, a great and an awesome God. He's an awesome God. He does wonders. He does great things. And so Moses is reminding the children of Israel of this God who has brought them, who has delivered them. He's reminding them of his great acts. He's reminding them, as I said earlier, the book of Deuteronomy is a book of kukumbuka. We are remembering certain things. We so easily forget, especially when faced with the obstacles that we may find ourselves being faced with. It's very easy for us to forget the things that God has done for us in the past. And so often why even we give up is we are giving up because we are seeing what is ahead of us. And that brings such fear in our hearts that we quickly forget how God in the past has delivered us. Many years ago, there are those stories that illustrate certain things that you can never forget. I think this past week I was sharing with Shekinah the story which just reminds us about our value. And this guy was talking about 1,000 shillings. If I take 1,000 shilling note and step on it, fold it, put it on that, the value of that 1,000 shillings doesn't change. It is still 1,000 shillings. Whether it's a fresh crisp note from the bank. I mean, some of us like those notes. Sometimes those days when we used to deal with cash, I used to like being given those fresh notes. But whether they are fresh or it's an old one, the value remains the same. And that should encourage you. It doesn't matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter what somebody says about you. Your value in the eyes of God have never changed. It's still like that 1,000 notes. You're still as valuable. Your value doesn't change just because of some dirt that is on you. Your value remains the same. But another story that I'm reminded of, that is a powerful illustration, is a story of how God forgives us. And the story is told about this guy who used to work at Intercon those days when Intercon was Intercon, and he was a cook in that place. And so one day, just being broke, and I know some of us, please don't do this, but some people do this. So one day he decided to steal chicken from the kitchen and go take home. Not for a bad reason, but to go and feed his family. And suddenly it was discovered that one chicken was missing from the kitchen, from the store. And the boss came to find out. And so the boss, his boss, began to threaten him with that chicken story. And so he told him that if this guy, the boss, what he will do is that he will always ask this guy to step in for him so that he could go and do his own things. He will change shifts. This guy sometimes will work 2 shifts just to cover for his boss, who had threatened him that if he didn't do that, he was going to tell him over to their overall boss. And this guy suffered for a long time, a period of time. He had to work 2 shifts sometimes. This guy will send him on errands. This guy really harassed him. And each time he will try to object and to resist, this guy will tell him, kumbuka, kuku. So kumbuka kuku. And that will be the phrase that will just quickly frighten him and make him do whatever this guy will ask him to do. Until one day, he gained wisdom. One day he decided enough is enough. He had suffered enough. And so he decided to go and see his overall boss. And he went and he confessed his sins to his overall boss. And he told him, no, this thing happened on this particular date, but I'm the one who was responsible for it. And he pleaded for mercy as he explained himself in the situation. And his overall boss did indeed forgive him. His other boss, his immediate boss, not knowing, coming in the afternoon, again, tried to bully this guy and told him to do something that he knew this guy will do for him. And this time, as the guy came, this man who had stolen the chicken was very confident. And he looked at him and smiled and said, no, I will not do it. And the guy told him, kumbuka, kuku. But at this particular time, the kumbuka kuku didn't have any effect on this guy. Why? Because he had confessed his sin to the overall boss. And he laughed at his immediate supervisor and he moved on with his life. And that was a great deliverance to him. And that's how it happens. So often the enemy wants to come and remind us of the things that we have done, even though we have confessed and our sins have been forgiven. And we need to remember, we need to kumbuka, not kuku this time, but we need to kumbuka the good things that the Lord has done for us. We need to remember all the good things that God has done in our lives. Let's remember the reason why we Remember the last time when you were in a financial mess and how God came through for you. Remember that time when you were stuck somewhere and you thought, wow, that was the end of the world. You know, sometimes when you're faced with those obstacles, we think tumefika mwisho. This is the end of it. But remember going back how God delivered you at that particular time. Remember how he rescued you. Remember how he delivered you from whatever it is that he delivered you from. Friends, remember the things that God has done for you. Remember why you are in the place where you are at currently. Remember the victories that God has given you, even as you have lived your life, as you've seen him deliver you over and over again. Remember the things that God is doing. And this morning, I just want to challenge us, again, to remember what the Lord has done for you. What has God done for you here at Abundant Life Community Church? Can you remember the things that God has spoken to your heart concerning your life, concerning this church, concerning whatever things that it is that you have believed in him for, or are currently going through and looking back past? You know, sometimes we even forget as we're going through those challenges in our workplace. We forget the things and how the testimony that you had of how you got that job. Remember how God gave you that victory. Remember how you prayed and God answered you and gave you that spouse. Remember how you prayed as a parent and God blessed you with that child who is now giving you a lot of problems. Remember how you prayed and believed God and God came through for you. But now here you are complaining about the same blessing that God blessed you with. Let's remember the things that the Lord has done for us. So in this portion of scripture, Moses is reminding them what the Lord their God did for them. He knew there was every possibility of them being overcome by fear. And especially when they're about encountering the great obstacles, the enemies along the way, as they're about to possess the land. And in verse 17 it says, if you say in your heart that these nations are greater than us, how can I dispossess them? And probably you're here this morning and you have said to yourself, this enemy, this thing is so great. How can I make it? How will I make it in this situation? This thing that is before me is huge. As a LCC, we can be saying, this 1 million shillings is a lot. It's huge. This is a huge obstacle. How will we make it seeing these few people? How will we make it seeing these hard economic times? How will we make it in this difficult, with this difficult situation in our lives? Looking at your own personal life, what is it that you're faced with this morning? That you're saying, hey, you're saying in your heart, these are things you don't say, tell people loudly, but you're saying in your heart, hey, how will I make it? This nation is great. These things that I'm faced with are great. How can I dispossess them? How can I dispossess them? How can I get that breakthrough? How can I get myself through this place? Yesterday I met a lady, very, very interesting story. This lady happened to be one of the top directors, top management in one of the serious government bodies here in Kenya. And you know, some of these positions are very, very sensitive. So when they knew this lady had just been appointed before Uhuru's term came to an end. And so with the new government, they were the first people that were targeted, and she was removed from her position. Not because of any mistake, just because of the change of regime. So she found herself out of work. And after a few months, they came calling. They came looking for her again, and she was given back her job. And she's still there up to this point. And then we were just sharing with her yesterday, and she was giving me her testimony, saying, you know, for me, I don't rely on anybody. I don't rely on godfathers. You know, it's a favor of God. And if God wants you in that place, he will put you there. People were scared. People were trying to now sweet talk the new regime. But she just went home, and in 6 months, I think 3 months' time, they called her back and gave her back her position in that organization. So no matter what we are faced with, let's not be fearful. Let's remember the things that God has done for us. So as Moses is warning the Israelites because he knows that they may not enter and possess the land which God is giving them. And so in verse 18 it says, what this great Lord did to Pharaoh and all Egypt. He's reminding them of the great deliverance with which God had delivered them. Friends, as we look back at our own lives, God has delivered us. Christ died for us. And I think the greatest thing, the thing that we could never, no money could buy, nothing could ever, with all our might, our wealth, we could never have accomplished is gaining our salvation. But Christ died for us at the cross, and he delivered us from the bondage of sin and from the penalty of judgment. That's the great deliverance by which Christ has delivered us. Just like the children of Israel were delivered with a mighty deliverance out of Egypt. God through Christ has delivered us from bondage of sin and from the penalty of sin. And in Romans chapter 8 and verse 32 it says, he who did not spare his own son, talking about God, who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? And all things means all things. If he did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? I don't know what it is that you believe in the Lord for, but that is included in those all things. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? God who delivered us, God who has done the bigger part. These other things are, in quotes, small things for the Lord to do for us. The greatest thing, the most difficult thing was saving us. And if he did that for us, all these other things that we are giving us sleepless nights are small things in his sight. They are small things. And look back in your own life. There are things that, there are nights you didn't sleep, and then the following day, and now when you look back, you're wondering, why was I losing sleep over that thing? Because God has delivered you. God brought you through. God has been so gracious to you. God has made a way for you. And so always remember what he has done for you. Do you remember the great trials that your eyes saw? The signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which the Lord your God brought you out. God is reminding them. So will the Lord your God do also to all the people of whom you are afraid? All those things that are causing you sleepless nights and are causing you to be afraid, the same way God delivered you in the past, God is going to deliver you. He's going to do the same thing that he did to you those many years ago. The great trials that you have seen, the things that you're going through, again, remember how the Lord has delivered you. Now, Paul, when faced with a difficult situation, we're not told what exactly that was, but he was going through a very, very difficult situation. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 10, Paul says, he delivered us from such a deadly peril. It was such a deadly thing that they even had almost given up of life itself. If you read the preceding verses, it was something difficult. There's something that he was going through with his companions. And he says, as you read there in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, nothing compared to what they were going through. But he says, he delivered us from such a deadly peril. And then he goes ahead and says, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will deliver us again. Now this is very interesting. If you learn English, there's a past tense here. He delivered us. That's in the past. And then there's a present. He will deliver us. Now he will deliver us. But then again in the future. So for those problems that are yet to come, God will still deliver us. He will deliver us. We need to set our hope that he will deliver us even out of those things that we are faced with.